I've created my own power rankings algorithm that is based 100% off of 2020 statistics and contains zero bias. Here are my rankings heading into week 15 of the 2020 NFL season. So I'll give you a quick rundown of how my spreadsheet is laid out. In the first column, we have what teams were ranked last week. In the second column, we have what teams are currently ranked. In the third column, we have the names of the teams, 2 asterisks beside teams that are current division leaders, and single asterisks beside teams that are current wildcard holders. And then in this next column, we have what teams are plus minus in my rankings between last week and this week. Then we've got ESPN's power rankings. We've got NFL's power rankings. We've got my power rankings again, just so we can easily see what my plus minus is in my rankings compared to ESPN's and NFL's. So the Jets are still in last place, Jacksonville is still in second last place, and Cincinnati has finally moved down to third last place for me. That is where ESPN and NFL has had them ranked for the past couple of weeks. Just took my algorithm a little while to adjust down to them. Once again, that's because ESPN and NFL are ranked by analysts, so they can use their eyes. So once they saw Joe Burrow go down, they immediately tanked Cincinnati in the rankings, whereas my algorithm is statistical based, so it's going to take a little bit longer for Cincinnati to drop in my rankings, or any team for that matter. You know, their play on the field has to literally drop for them to drop in my rankings. You can't speculatively drop because my rankings are based off of statistics. Then we've got the Cowboys up 1 spot after trouncing said Bengals this past week. ESPN has Houston at 29, and so does NFL. So I'm 1 spot lower than ESPN on Dallas, and I'm 5 spots lower than NFL on Dallas. Then I've got the LA Chargers at 28. They're up 1 in my rankings, but I've got the LA Chargers 5 spots lower than ESPN and 6 spots lower than the NFL power rankings, and that makes the LA Chargers the team that I'm actually the lowest on compared to ESPN and NFL. The Chargers have the 7th worst scoring defense in all of the NFL, and their defense has continually dragged them down in my power rankings. Justin Herbert was able to eke out his 3rd win of the season this past week against the Falcons, but the Falcons without Julio Jones is just an absolute joke of a team. The Chargers play the Raiders tonight, and if the Chargers were to win that game, it wouldn't just be Herbert's first back-to-back wins in his career, it would also be his first divisional win in his career. Herbert is currently 0-3 against AFC West opponents, but his final 3 games this season are all against AFC West opponents, so he will have 3 shots at redemption to end the season. Well, then at 27, we have the Houston Texans, down 3 spots in my power rankings. I'm 2 spots higher than ESPN and NFL on the Houston Texans, who both have them at 29. And man, Houston just got blown out by a just abysmal Bears team that has been struggling throughout this season. Then at 26, we have the Carolina Panthers, who made Drew Lock look like Patrick Mahomes this past week. They're down 1 spot in my power rankings, and I'm 1 spot higher on the Panthers than both ESPN and NFL, who have the Panthers ranked at 27th. Then at 25th, I've got the Detroit Lions. They just lost to Green Bay. This week, they're going to have to go lose to Tennessee, and it looks like Matt Stafford's not playing for them. I'm even with ESPN on the Lions, and I'm 3 spots higher than the NFL on the Lions. Then at 24, I've got the Atlanta Falcons, down 4 spots in my rankings after losing narrowly to the Chargers this past week. I'm 2 spots higher than ESPN on the Falcons, and I'm 1 spot lower than NFL on them. Then I've got the New York Giants at 23. They're also down 4 spots in my power rankings, and I'm 3 spots lower than ESPN on the Giants and 4 spots lower than NFL on the Giants. The Giants were looking really promising there for a minute, but Daniel Jones is clearly not ready to be back playing quarterback yet in the NFL, and Colt McCoy I have 0 faith in. So my faith overall in the Giants is probably reflected in my power rankings right now. And we got Philadelphia at 22. They're up 4 spots in my power rankings. I'm 2 spots higher than ESPN and 3 spots higher than NFL on Philadelphia. And I gotta say, I love Philadelphia now with Jalen Hurts. And the crazy thing is, they're not out of the playoff race yet. They're only a game and a half behind Washington. So if they run the table, including beating Washington in week 17, and Washington were to, say, lose to Seattle this week, I mean, Philadelphia could still win this division. Then at 21, I've got Denver up 2 spots after Drew Lock just went off this past week. They got a nice home game against the Bills this week. To continue their momentum, it'll definitely be a tough game for the Broncos. I'm one spot higher than ESPN on the Broncos, and I'm one spot lower than the NFL on the Broncos. So we're all pretty much in agreement, just bang, bang, bang. And at 20, down 2 spots this week, I've got the Minnesota Vikings, who really got embarrassed and exposed by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this past week. I'm 4 spots lower than ESPN on the Vikings, and I'm 3 spots lower than the NFL on the Vikings. So obviously they both think the Vikings are a much better team than my power rankings do. At 19, I've got San Francisco, down 2 spots in my rankings. I am even with ESPN on the 49ers, and I'm 2 spots higher than the NFL on the 49ers. Then at 18, we have the division-leading Washington football team up 4 spots in my power rankings after beating the 49ers, who are currently, you see there, 1 spot lower than them in the power rankings. But going into last week, they were 5 spots higher than Washington in the power rankings. So that was a significant win for Washington after just having a significant win the week before against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And, you know, Washington's also on a 4-game winning streak right now. Anyways, Washington up 4 spots in my power rankings is actually tied with the Chicago Bears as my biggest riser of the week. As I said, the Washington football team is on a 4-game win streak, which is currently the 2nd longest win streak in the NFL, behind only the Kansas City Chiefs. The fact that the Washington football team beat the Steelers 2 weeks ago without one of their best offensive players, Antonio Gibson, is nuts. The Washington football team has the 6th best scoring defense in football, and over the last 3 games has allowed a mere 16 points per game. Last week, Washington's defense alone scored 2 touchdowns, leading to 14 points. And their defense only gave up 15 points to the 49ers. If Washington can get to the playoffs and have Alex Smith and Antonio Gibson healthy, they could be favorites in the first round. I know that's getting ahead of myself quite a bit, but the Washington football team is 1 game up on the Giants and 1.5 games up on the Eagles, and there's only 3 games remaining. So the margin of error for the Eagles and Giants is starting to become minuscule. Then at 17, up 4 spots in my power rankings, 4 spots higher than ESPN's rankings, 9 spots higher than NFL's rankings. The Chicago Bears are the team that I am highest on compared to the ESPN and NFL power rankings. The Bears and the Vikings are both 6 and 7 right now, and are both sitting 1 game behind the Arizona Cardinals, who are currently the 7th and final seed in the NFC playoffs. The Bears actually take on the Vikings this week, so that is a must-win game for both teams to keep their playoff hopes alive. As I've stated, ESPN and NFL both have the Vikings ranked fairly significantly higher than the Bears, whereas I've got it the opposite. So if the Bears can win, or at least cover the 3.5 point spread as road underdogs this week against the Vikings, I feel like that would validate my power rankings. Over the last 4 weeks, the Bears had 3 consecutive divisional losses, and then the 1 win this past week against the Houston Texans, 36-7. Meanwhile, the Vikings are 2-2 over their last 4 games, but their 2 wins were hardly inspiring. One of them was a 1-point win against the 4-9 Carolina Panthers, and then the other win was a 3-point victory over the 1-12 Jacksonville Jaguars. Meanwhile, the Vikings' 2 losses were to the 4-9 Dallas Cowboys, yikes, and the 8-5 Buccaneers, who trounced the Vikings 26-14. It's going to be an interesting game this weekend, since both the Vikings and the Bears are capable of playing great football, but are also both capable of playing laugh-out-loud, terrible football. At 16, down 1 spot in my power rankings is the New England Patriots. They're about to drop further after my Miami Dolphins just crap on them this week. But the Patriots just lost embarrassingly to the Rams this last week, and I'm 1 spot higher than ESPN on the Patriots and 2 spots higher than the NFL on the Patriots. Then at 15, we have the 7th and final seed in the NFC playoffs, the Arizona Cardinals, up 1 spot in my power rankings this past week. I'm 1 spot lower than ESPN on the Cardinals and 2 spots lower than NFL on the Cardinals. The Raiders are another team like the Patriots that I feel is trending downwards. They just lost really badly to the Colts, who are a quality football team, like the Patriots losing to the Rams, so it's a fair enough to lose. But the way that both those teams did lose was very telling to me. I'm 1 spot higher than ESPN on the Raiders, and I'm 2 spots higher than NFL on the Raiders. Then at 13, in the 5th seed in the AFC playoff race, down 8 spots in my power rankings since they lost a real nail-biter to the Baltimore Ravens this past week. We have the Cleveland Browns. I'm 2 spots lower than ESPN on the Browns. I'm 4 spots lower than NFL. I probably side more with the ESPN and NFL power rankings personally, but dropping 8 spots this past week, the Cleveland Browns are my biggest faller of the week. That Cleveland Browns-Baltimore Ravens Monday Night Football game was probably the most entertaining football game I've seen all year. I honestly can't remember a more entertaining football game in 2020. Comment below if you can, because my mind is honestly blank. It's super unfortunate because the Browns really played well enough to win. At least Cleveland still controls their own destiny. They're in the 5th seed in the playoffs right now, and they're 1 game ahead of the 7th seed team. So as long as Cleveland wins out the rest of the season, there's no possible way that they can miss the playoffs. But the Browns are only 1 game ahead of the Ravens, and the Browns have lost to the Ravens twice. So if the Browns even lose 1 game and the Ravens win out, the Ravens would steal the Browns' playoff spot and maybe kick the Browns out of the playoffs altogether. The Browns' remaining schedule is against the Giants, who they obviously should beat, the Jets, which is a slam dunk, and then the Steelers, which is going to be a tough one. Meanwhile, the Ravens play the Jaguars, the Giants, and the Bengals. So only really the Giants have a chance to pose a threat to the Ravens. The Browns, who are already at 9 wins, haven't had a 10-win season since 2007. Even worse than that, the Browns haven't had an 11-win season since 1994. With 3 games remaining this year, the Browns have a real shot at hitting that 11-win mark. And if the Browns somehow manage to run the table, they would hit the 12-win mark for only the 2nd time since the franchise joined the NFL back in 1950. With their dynamic running attack and elite pass rushers, the Browns play a style of football that can be played at home, can be played on the road, can be played indoors or out. Then at 12, fresh off a massive must-win game over the Browns, we've got the Baltimore Ravens up 2 spots in my power rankings, and I'm still 2 spots lower than ESPN on the Ravens and 4 spots lower than NFL on the Ravens. Then I have my beloved Miami Dolphins, fresh off a tight loss to the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm pretty proud of how my Dolphins played in that game, although we still lost even though we got 3 interceptions on Patrick Mahomes. So apparently, you have to do more than get 3 interceptions on Mahomes just to beat him. That's craziness. Anyways, Miami is 2 spots higher in my rankings compared to ESPN's rankings and 3 spots higher than NFL's rankings. Then at 10, we've got the Seattle Seahawks. They're up 1 spot in my power rankings. But I mean, the Seahawks lost to the Giants 2 weeks ago. Who cares that they beat the Jets this past week? It's going to be interesting to see what they're able to do with the Washington football team, who are hot right now this upcoming week. At 9, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, up 3 spots in my power rankings after beating the Minnesota Vikings this past week. The Vikings were actually the 7th seed in the NFC playoff race going into that game. My rankings are 3 higher than ESPN and NFL on the Buccaneers. Then at 8th, we have the NFC West leading LA Rams, up 2 spots in my power rankings. And I gotta say, I think the Rams are probably one of only 3 teams that I think have a real solid chance to win the NFC right now. I'm impressed with the LA Rams. I'm 2 spots lower than ESPN on the Rams and 2 spots lower than the NFL on the Rams. Then amazingly tied for 6th place, we have Green Bay and Tennessee. They're both division leaders right now. Green Bay went up 1 spot in my rankings this week. Tennessee went up 2 spots in my rankings this week. I'm 2 spots higher than ESPN on the Tennessee Titans, and I'm 5 spots higher than NFL on the Tennessee Titans. Meanwhile, I'm 4 spots lower than ESPN and NFL on the Packers. So according to the pros, I'm massively overranking the Titans and I'm massively underranking the Packers. But I wanted to take a little bit of a closer look since it's so crazy that these 2 teams are tied this late in the year in my algorithm. On the season, the Packers have 1 more win than the Titans, but I do believe the Titans have had a tougher schedule. Tougher schedule is kind of tough to prove, so one thing we can look at is common opponents between these 2 teams. Both the Titans Titans and the Packers have played the Vikings, the Texans, the Jaguars, the Colts, and the Bears. The Packers are 4-2 in 6 games against those teams with a point differential of plus 31. The Titans are 6-1 in 7 games against those teams with a point differential of plus 19. So against common opponents, the Packers had a more dominant margin of victory, but the Titans had a better win percentage. Ultimately, it's going to be awesome to watch these two behemoths go head to head when they play each other in 2 weeks. Then we'll find out who the better team is. So then at 5, I have the Indianapolis Colts ranked ahead of the division-leading Tennessee Titans, who they split games with 1-1 this season. The Colts moved up 1 spot in my power rankings this week. I'm 4 spots higher than ESPN on the Colts, and I'm 5 spots higher than the NFL on the Colts. And dropping 1 spot this week, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers at 4. The Steelers just lost 2 in a row after going undefeated for their first 11 games of the season. And both the teams that Pittsburgh lost to were quality football teams, but the way that Pittsburgh played in those games made them seem rather incompetent, and I do not have a lot of faith in Pittsburgh being able to beat quality teams at this point in time. That offense in Pittsburgh is going to have to do some serious soul searching if they're going to want to make a playoff run this year. I'm even with ESPN on the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I'm 1 spot higher than the NFL on the Steelers, who have them dropped all the way to 5th. Then at 3, we've got the New Orleans Saints, who just... I can't even believe how bad they looked last week against the Eagles. The Saints hadn't given up a 100-yard rusher in 3 years, and in that game, they gave up 2 separate 100-yard rushers in Miles Sanders and quarterback Jalen Hurts making his first NFL start. Perhaps New Orleans just had their eye on the future, looking ahead to the Kansas City Chiefs game that they have this upcoming week, so they didn't adequately game plan for the Philadelphia Eagles, and that would explain the incompetent performance by the Saints. But if the Saints just get mollywopped by the Chiefs this week, it's going to be a terrible look for Sean Payton, and the Saints are going to be looking to rush Drew Brees back in ASAP. I'm 2 spots higher than ESPN on the Saints, and I'm even with NFL. Then at 2, fresh off one of the biggest wins in the entire NFL season, we have the Buffalo Bills up 2 spots after beating the Pittsburgh Steelers last week. I'm 1 spot higher than ESPN on the Bills. I'm 2 spots higher than the NFL on the Bills. I gotta say, the Bills are playing better defense now. It seems like they're just stacked on offense with playmakers, and I honestly think the Bills are the only team in the AFC that could really give the Chiefs a run for their money in the playoffs. Speaking of the Chiefs, of course, at number 1 is the Kansas City Chiefs. They're still number 1 in my rankings after last week. They're still number 1 in ESPN's rankings. They're still number 1 in the NFL's rankings. So I think it's pretty safe to say that the Kansas City Chiefs are the best team in football. If the Saints aren't able to take down the Chiefs this week, I feel like the Chiefs might not lose again until next season. If you made it all the way to the end of the video and you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and hit the bell to be notified when my next Power Rankings video is out. Like the video and comment below with any thoughts. Follow me on Twitter at MPTalks. Good luck to all of you out there who are in your fantasy football playoffs this weekend. Cheers.